Hello, everyone. This is Under the Mayo. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Gaming Enthusiasm, and I'm very happy to have a special guest here. This is Matt McMuscles. Matt, how are you doing today?
I am very good, Mr. Mayonnaise, sir. How are you doing this fine Thursday afternoon?
Good, good. I'm just now starting the day. Are you on the YouTuber schedule of you wake up whenever you wake up, but then you work for like 16 hours straight and then totally screw up your sleep schedule?
Every time, a Monday starts and you're like, this is the week I'm going to be a normal human and I'm going to get up at 8 a.m., go
Yeah.
for a walk or a swim or a whatever, and I'll do that for 3 days. Then I'll go into the YouTuber thing of like get up, have a coffee, go straight, check Twitter, go straight to YouTube. All right, how's everything going? And then yeah, the 16-hour hell day starts. So
It's are you do you struggle with stopping when you're working, when you're doing a script or you're recording or whatever, and it's been like 12 hours and you're like it's 4 in the morning, but you're like that if you lay down, you're just going to be thinking about like that those little parts that you need to finish, and so you might as well do them.
yes and no. I think like 5 years ago, yeah, I would regularly stay up to like 3, 4 a.m.
Mm.
just doing whatever. Um, and like, yeah, my wife just gives up and she's like, okay, I'm going to bed now. I have to go to bed. I'm like, yeah, no, sorry. I'm doing this and that. And now it's like, I do try to, all right, like midnight. If there's anything left to do by midnight, unless it's, like a sponsored thing, unless it's like a client, like someone else is involved in it, unless really have to get something done, I'll just try to leave it tomorrow and just try to be in bed by midnight because also, as you get a bit older, you're like your sleep is precious. Your sleep
Sure.
is amazing. You covet any hour you can have to actually get some shut eye. So, I in the last like I'd say 2 or 3 years, I'm like, no, I really need to. Not everything, even though your brain is like telling you, oh, you should get this thumbnail made, or you need to tell that editor to get this done, or you need to edit something yourself, and you can get it done now. You gotta fight him. You gotta fight that YouTuber voice in your head.
Is that something that came with more life responsibilities? Like, are you a family man? Do you have like another job? Do you have things that can be negatively impacted by the obsessive YouTuber work mindset?
I don't have no. I, don't, I mean, I got a second cat, so there's that, I
Okay,
guess.
okay,
But I think it's just you after a certain amount of time, the actual like, you know, I'd say weekly to monthly like bouts of burnout where you're just like, oh, I can't.
yeah,
I'm having like a rough like day, and then you might not actually wind up doing anything for a few days, and then of course you feel bad about it, and then you go back to burning
hmm,
yourself out. But it's just me kind of realizing that's you need to do it at least once a week where you need to say to yourself, now go to bed, no, just
yeah.
take care of yourself, drink way more water, please, for the love of God, drink more water.
Oh man,
That's a big one.
I
But
had
yeah,
a full like oven frozen pizza and 3 sodas while I was working yesterday, and I still feel terrible. I don't even know like you should you have to be eating and drinking well when you do this job because you're not doing anything physical. So eating like crap just is like twice as bad.
yeah, I mean, again, for me it's like I'll snack a lot through the day, like little things, and then like when it comes to like actual meal, I don't eat a lot. I'm like, no, I'm good, and then
Okay.
I'll just snack again, which is also not great. You should probably not snack all that much, and then just enjoy the big meal that you will have, and that's always a problem because when you're working a bunch, you don't have time to make like a big lunch and a big dinner,
Yeah.
even if you're two people cooking it. If you're with a significant other, it's still like a huge in your head, a huge time sink. Like you're just like, oh, this is gonna take like an hour, and
Yeah.
that's ages in script writing time. Like I could get 2 pages done,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just a lot of like doing this for a while, being on YouTube and getting older. Like I'm in my late 30s. Just realizing, yeah, you could do all this shit in your 20s, easy.
Yeah.
uh, you're invincible. You have all these buffs, but once you get into your mid 30s, like all those buffs start to go away, and you have to take care of yourself.
It's interesting that you talk about like how busy you can be doing this, yet like you're at a point, and you have been for a while on your channel where you have editors, and
Yeah.
but do you feel like you're still just as busy even though you have people doing your editing for you? Does it just
Yeah,
make
but
you want to do more stuff? Is that it?
that I think that is a bit of it. Like, every week or so I'll have one project that I'm kind of editing in the background where like I'm like, okay, I can handle this, and or it's a particular game, like I don't know if it's like a Final Fight thing or a fighting game thing. Sometimes I'll be like, oh no, I really want to tackle this myself, and
Okay.
put specific gags, blah blah blah. But when I have all when you have some editors, you I was talking to Maximilian about this, and it's like I know this person's quite good, but I don't trust myself that I'm going to be happy with the end product. I have to.
Yeah.
I feel bad, but I have to micromanage things, and I do feel like that sometimes too. It depends on the project, obviously, but you'll you'll start to go, okay, thanks for your work, and then you'll just start doing stuff yourself. Like you'll see things and be like, oh no, it'll take too long to tell this person, can you redo it? You feel bad,
Yeah.
not even redo it, but like add things, and oh, sorry, that's not specifically what I was looking for.
Or this
And
this thing is like 2 frames off. Could you just slide it 2 frames to the left? Like, oh man.
exactly, yeah, and usually my you work with a couple different editors, and there's one or two. I'm like, I don't need to tell this person much. They know what they're doing, and other people that like, especially newer people that might work with, like my editing notes for an editor are like massive. Like it's just everything in Google Docs is just highlighted. Like every other word is like this here, this there, 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 and that's almost as much work as if you had just done it
Yeah.
yourself. Because I'm still finding the links or the pictures or the reference that I'm speaking about. So ultimately it does save you time, but because you can do other things while that person is taking care of it, and that's kind of what it does. Like, oh, now that that's freed up, for that's being taken care of, like everything on my part is being taken care of. Still have to give a video a final check, blah blah blah. But then you go, oh well, I can do something else. You don't even take it to just have fun, to just enjoy like playing a game or watching something. Like I almost always take it to be like, oh well, now I can get a jump on the next thing. Oh, I can send an email to this developer and ask them questions about this that I've been meaning to do. And like it helps in that way, but it also doesn't help in that it doesn't really make you less busy.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I've rejected a couple of editing offers over the past year because while it would be nice, I mean, my channel doesn't have the traffic to really justify it financially, but also it's just like I re-edit every video like 20 times before I publish it, and then I upload it,
Right.
and then I watch it the next day, and I'm like, ugh. And then I go back and I re-upload and I re-render and upload. I've got that bad habit of like finishing the edit, and instead of sitting there and watching the 20-minute video in the program, I'll render it and be like, it's good, and then I upload
Yeah.
it, and then I watch it, and I'm like, no, I missed that, and then so I've doubled my time. It's
Yeah, you can save yourself by watching it, but sometimes you're like, if you're editing it yourself or you've seen it enough already, you
yeah,
you don't want to watch it again. You're like, no, not like I think something like that happened where I was playing a old Spider-Man game based on the first Sam Raimi movie, and everything kind of went fine except in the game I was locked in like a in-game cutscene. Like there was a bug where my Spider-Man was just walking forward and enemies just hitting me. I'm invincible, I can't die, I can't pause, it won't even let me pause the game. And I'm like, oh Jesus, okay, well it's fun that I got a bug. That's something, that's content, right?
sure,
All right, so what I'll do is just, before I send this like 2 hours of gameplay to an editor, just cut it all down a little bit. I'll just render out a video myself where I'll just cut this out because it was like 12 sustained minutes of nothing happening. So I'll just cut this out myself. Oh, there's a bit at the start that like is kind of rough or whatever. I'll cut that out myself. I'll re-render a new version, and then I'll send that to the editor. And then eventually the editor is like, hey, 30 minutes into your video, there's just like, it just stops on a cutscene. Like it's just locked on there. And I was like, oh, that's a bug thing. That's fine. Don't worry about that. He's like, no, that's a thing that happens later. This is like, there's a scene of Topher Grace as Eddie Brock, and he's just stuck on this screen. Like the game is not moving. And I was like, holy shit, are you serious? Because I didn't watch back the video. Yeah. When I rendered it, there was some sort of weird issue. I don't know why. So I had to go back to the original file and like blah, blah, you know, it's, you save yourself so much time by actually doing that, but I wasn't going to sit and look at my shitty, like, superhero PS2 gameplay for 2 hours. Yeah. That's not worth it.
You know, you have to fight that urge of, like, going to publish something that you've just recently changed and not watching it just because you've watched it 20 times already. If you make a change and you render, you have to watch it again. And because the one time that you decide not to do it, that's the time that you're going to upload something embarrassing. I did a sponsored video for Warstride challenges back in April, and I made a last-second change right before I uploaded, and I didn't watch it. And sure enough, by some freak accident, I had accidentally deleted all of the audio during the part where I mentioned that it was a sponsored segment.
Oof.
And so it's like, oh, and I have to announce something, and then there was just like 8 seconds of an awkward silence. Then the video started. I was like, no. It's an awful feeling.
That's funny because Warstride Challenge, I also got an offer to play that, and it looked really cool. And I simply got offered that at a time where I'm like, I can't.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. Like, you know, the PR company that was repping it, like they're pretty good and everything. And I'd worked with them successfully on some stuff before, and they're like, do you want to check this out? I'm like, it does look like something I would do, but like, I have too many things going on right this week, and I don't want to add another one, and maybe something might go wrong with it, or like I'm just didn't work out. But how is that, by the way?
It's fun. I thought it was really fun.
Cool.
I think the only like frustrating aspect of it is that the hitboxes are the least forgiving hitboxes I've ever seen. If you are off by a millimeter, then like the bullet makes no contact with the enemies. You have to hit them. There are no hitboxes beyond their polygons. And and when it's a speedrunning game and you're trying to move as fast as possible and get headshots in a split second, it can be a little frustrating.
Right, gotcha.
But, you know, I also got to see the other side of it and be like, hey, this is a game developed for the hardcore speedrunners. Like, maybe it should be laser accurate. You know?
Maybe, I can see that.
So, you know, I didn't even really mention it because I was like, I didn't even know what side to take on it. But it's pretty fun. There's a lot of replay value because you can go back and play like 5 variations of every level you've already beaten. And they get consistently harder with different time challenges. It's a really fun game.
Like, I still have Postal Brain Damage just sitting there unplayed.
Yeah,
on
here
Steam,
too.
And I just haven't had a second. Like, some people threw at me hey, there's this weird-looking robot fighting game that just got released on Steam, Fight of Steel, which is a great name.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm sure that's something. And just sitting there. I still haven't even booted up Neon White. And I was all about Neon White when I first saw it. I was like, oh, this looks awesome. This looks really neat. And
everyone's recommending that to me.
Just again, not having time. Oh, Cult of the Lamb is coming up. Oh, okay. I don't have time for that either. No. So yeah, it's rough out there. It's that's what I was saying before. It's like I want, like, after a certain point, if you're making so many things, if you have podcasts, if you're dipping your toes in a lot of stuff, it's like I very much miss just playing things just for fun, just to see. Not even for like content purposes, just like, oh, there's this old janky thing people told me about. Oh, it got released on Steam like 2 years ago. Nobody knew about it. What was it called? It's a War of the World. Gray Skies, a War of the Worlds game. It's like this third-person action game that takes place during like a War of the Worlds story, and I don't know where it's made. It's probably in a country that doesn't exist anymore. I don't know. But everyone told me like, oh, this is super janky thing, and it's, a bad third person game, and I haven't had a chance to either. And all the demos from the Steam Next Fest, and Jesus,
Yeah. Sulaco was great. Deadlink.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd love to start getting into like just like your channel. I mean your main series is What Happened, right? That's the big the those videos always do very very well. They're always very well put together. And I'm curious. You mentioned the editing process. Is that one of your series where it's like you script it, yeah, and you send your script, and then since it's the main series and it probably takes a lot of work, is that the main series where you have editors like cleaning your audio and putting the video together and all that?
Yeah. It depends on the game. If it's something that I have easy access to, I'll play through the game myself and record the footage, that type of thing. If it's something like that's super super old or super super rare, I'm like, yeah, maybe not. But usually, depending on the editor you use, they'll like, oh, I have that game, or I can do that, and
Yeah.
they'll do that bit too. But yeah, usually takes a while, depending if I can get a developer on the phone, basically.
Right.
Um,
The research
and
is probably
and
the longest aspect of that.
it kind of depends because I've had a few people like just email me out the blue. It's like, hey, I used to work for Capcom. You I got some dirt on this thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, cool, awesome. So it depends on that. Usually Japanese games, that's never really a thing that happens. But occasionally it can occur. But going back and forth, like I think I did a video on the Turok reboot from 2008, and I was able to like jump from person to person and finally get someone that worked on the game there to answer some questions. And I was really, really sad about that just because the person that I was talking to was just like, yeah, the Turok 2 game that we were making was going to be so cool. It was going to be so different compared to like a lot of other things, but still like Mad Max meets Jurassic Park, and the cerebral bore would allow you to control dinosaurs and you could wreck things. And I'm like, that sounds really neat. So usually when it gets sent to a editor, the script, they'll usually have a couple questions. I'll fill them as much as I can, and I'll usually go through the script again and put in all the editing notes of specific things I'd like to see. That's a problem sometimes where I will be skimming over the script and I'll miss like a particular thing that I did have in mind, and then the editor will give me back a cut, and I'll see something where I'm like, oh, I wanted a specific thing there. Why is that not there? And then I'll look back at the script and I'm like, oh, because I didn't even tell them. And I always feel bad about that. So that's usually stuff where I don't want to already add to whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
So I'll add it in later really quickly. But yeah, that's the main thing that I do, and it's kind of evolved over the years where I was able to start because I worked in QA for years at Ubisoft and IDOS, and just one or two people just I kind of stayed in contact with, and that leads to another person. A long time ago, I was doing QA on No More Heroes, the original No More Heroes on the Wii, and a producer that worked at Ubisoft wound up here, and then he wound up there, and then I saw that he worked on PlayStation All Stars. So that connection was kind of still there where I emailed him out of the blue. I'm like, do you know anything about PlayStation All Stars at your time that you worked on? He's like, yeah, I know some things. And I was like, cool. So that was kind of the first one that sort of kicked off where I'm like, yeah, I can just, even if it seems insurmountable, like a Sony published game or a, Capcom published game, like there's enough. If someone has a decent social media presence on Twitter or whatever it is, and you just go through on Moby Games a list of developers, like you just copy and paste their names, and you can find them on Twitter almost like, I'd say 50% of the time you have a good shot of finding someone,
Yeah,
and they'll,
Twitter's
well,
really changed the whole game of
it
being able to reach out to
has.
people. Like maybe you don't get the director, but maybe you get like someone who worked in the art department, right? Like you can find all kinds of people.
Yeah, it's really amazing that way because I didn't even think that sometimes it'll lead to I've had dead ends where I couldn't find anybody, or you also go by their game development history. If you see that they're still making games, they made a game in like 2002 and they still have credits on games till 2022. It's good odds that they're on social media at
Hmm.
some on some platform, and you can reach out to them that way. So being able to get those voices in on videos has been like a real boon to them in general, especially certain ones, especially developers that are like, we're really passionate about that game.
Yeah.
Like I've spoken to a few that are like, yeah, I don't really care about this game. Like I want to bury it. I had a
Yeah.
bad time on it, but more often than not, I'd say like 85% of the time, they're all like, oh yeah, we tried so many things, and for whatever reason, it just didn't work out, or we had to cut out what we really were excited about, and it wound up being this thing. So it's always really fascinating to speak to people that were really passionate about the game that they're working on.
How did the series of What Happened get started? Like, I didn't look back to see what the first episode was, but like what gave you the idea? Was it your experience in QA that made you want to do that, or yeah, what's the genesis of that?
I think it was mostly just remembering certain games that in my head in the early-ish 2000s, like 2001 to 2004. I just I think that was like my first time where I'm reading articles on like, IGN or GameSpot and just being like, "Oh, wow, what a disaster this seems to
Hmm.
be." The one that really strikes me as like the one that made me go, "Oh yeah," was like BMX Triple X.
Hmm. Yeah.
That is the first episode
Is
of
it?
the series. Yeah,
What a way to
despite the
kick it
fact that
off.
it is right. Despite the fact that in that episode, I go, "Welcome to another episode of What Happened," and I was just like, this will confuse people."
Yeah. Well,
Um,
now it works for the random playlists, right? So
it
you future
does,
proofed it.
it does, but I've had a few comments of people saying, "I don't get it. This is the first episode, but where are the other ones?" And I'm like, haha. So that was like one where I just remember hearing, like, for some reason the PlayStation 2 version of that game was censored, but the GameCube version was not. It had full like nudity and the unlockable stripper videos that you earned. And I remember like, as a 17-year-old going, "What? Like that's crazy." And then Duke Nukem Forever obviously is always in the conversation, but it wasn't actually the one I thought of immediately.
Hmm.
It was like Final Fight Streetwise was like anything that got close to a the developer closing down almost immediately was like on a short list. Oh yeah, that one. Oh, Ion Storm really didn't last uh, after the release of Daikatana, so that's
Right.
got to be in there. So I was just thinking of how many stories like that there were, and no matter how like original you might think your idea is, or how like uncovered you think you're finding a certain subject, like lots of people have the same sort of variance of the idea. So what happened is a very generic term. And usually, if you just look at a game like a really well-known bad game, there'll be lots of articles written throughout like the decades that just said what happened. And I just thought that was like a simple enough title
Yeah.
to name things by. And once I started making a full list of the games that I just knew off the top of my head, like, oh yeah, what the hell happened to Lair on the PS3? Holy shit,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
That's a big
was
one.
a mess. So the list just kind of grew from there, and then even modern times, like what the hell is happening with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines
Yeah.
2?
Yeah.
That's a big mess, and you can see some of these games coming from like a mile away.
Yeah. Now you
Like
have a sense for it, right?
you have a sense for it, and I'm sure you must have comments like this too. Sometimes you'll get people that get a little presumptuous and they don't mean anything bad by it, but they're like, "Oh, I can't wait for you to cover this one."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there's like no information on that game yet. It's like I have people saying, "Oh, I can't wait for the what happened on Street Fighter 6."
I saw that
I'm like,
tweet, and you were like, "Why? Why?
"What?"
What is there to say?
I,
Why?"
and then the person just said, "Well, I don't like the art style." I'm
Yeah,
like, I can't
you could do an
make a
episode on
video
that.
on how like Johnny Slayer 696 doesn't like the hip hop flavored art style. But you can definitely see some coming from miles away. But like for something like Street Fighter, where it's like they seem to like they're doing the opposite of everything they did wrong. At least right now from Street Fighter 5, it's like let's calm down everyone,
Yeah.
and I especially let people like know like let's wait for the game to come out, then we can start talking about whether it. And I'm also a big fan of wanting, increasingly so, to do videos like this on games that were big successes.
I was just about to mention that I really like how in the recent years you've started branching out your content on that series to not just be failures, but to be surprise successes or games that came back from failure, and also from time to time covering movies, right?
Yeah, movies are really fun, although just getting around copyright stuff is sometimes
it's the worst.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I love doing the video game movies
Yeah.
episodes. Those are always fun because almost all of them were like huge disasters.
Yeah, your Doom 2016 episode is excellent, right? And it's funny how whenever you talk about a success that like I can hear your like I don't know how you would say it, your preemptive frustration at the comment section as you drill it in. You're like, and again, I'm making it clear that this series is not just about games that were bad. Because you know those comments are coming. I thought, what are you talking about? This game was great. It's like you didn't even watch the video, did you?
Yeah, I mean, I get it that there's so many people in the world and only so many can watch your content, and not every single person can watch every single episode to
Right.
to acclimatize. But it does kind of that's why in a couple of videos, I think I stopped doing it after a while because I think at least now it's more or less established. And I love the comments where people let other commenters know, no, the show isn't about like just it's about anything that has messed up development cycles where things
Yeah.
stopped or started or got canceled and got rebooted, blah blah blah. It's for anything. Yeah, like the vast majority are all games that were didn't turn out too well. And even games that like came out and they're fine, they're okay. What I'm working on now is for Lost Planet 3, and I was playing a bit of that last night, and I was like, this is fine. It's like milk toast, like 7th gen Gears game,
Okay.
but it's solid, and there's nothing really wrong here. And I'm looking at reviews, and all the reviews are like, yeah, this doesn't do anything special, but it had a really interesting like history behind it that's not cataloged too well online, at least. But there's some stuff because Spark Unlimited, makers of the amazing legendary The Box, you would think, looking at that, why did Capcom team up with the makers of legendary The Box?
Well, why would
on-
Capcom do
Yeah.
X is a question you could ask every day.
I have a 5-hour video on just Capcom games. So, but yeah, like it's funny when you can even get two games where like nothing really happened. I mean, sorry, that its launch was kind of like everyone sort of was like, oh, that's a game, I guess, and just kind of moved on. It didn't have any like big disastrous launch or people talking about it. But there's a hidden history sometimes, and you could also say, well, it was the last Lost Planet game, and that was like in 2013, so something obviously went wrong, or else they would be continuing it. So there's always a story to something where a franchise just stopped, like either poor
Yeah.
sales or, well, why did it have poor sales? You can kind of go back a bit and see where things kind of went wrong. And it's 50% of the time whether you'll actually find a story there. Like a fan asked me for a Patreon request, and I looked at the two games in question, and I was like, I like one of them is like a Tales of game from Namco Bandai, and I was like, I'm looking, I can't find anything because it's a Japanese RPG. There's like not that. They're
Yeah.
the Japanese game developers rarely spill any tea, so it's hard to find anything on stuff like that. And when I looked at it, I was like, oh, it doesn't seem like there's any big problems with this, and the series is continuing. So you usually have to tell a person like that, like, hey, like I tried looking and I'm not really finding anything, but if you have any other suggestions, like let's see what else we can tackle. So.
You mentioned that the whole like idea of what happened, like it applies to a lot of things. You can find a whole bunch of articles diving into that. Yours isn't the only series that explores that stuff. I was wondering if you have seen Train Records from Todd In The Shadows.
No, I have not.
It's what happened, but for albums.
Ooh, I'm not sure if it's the same video, but I have seen one or two things in like my suggested list where it seemed to be about like albums, like the biggest like album flops or something that was
Yeah, it,
like Chinese Democracy from Guns N' Roses is usually in the conversation. But no, I haven't actually watched these, but that's very intriguing as well.
that's the recommendation. Todd In The Shadows. He sits there
Okay.
in the dark in a profile at a piano. He's a very good piano player, and he's kind of like your channel where he's got like various different series that like he covers one hit wonders. He does modern pop song reviews. He does his like history stuff, and he also has this kind of what happened style series where he examines like Van Halen 3 or Saint Anger or
Oh,
Jules
damn it!
Pop. Yeah.
I was gonna say, please
Yeah.
leave Saint Anger alone. I think it's neat.
It's that, but it
Everyone's
is a
so
story.
into Saint Anger. It is a story for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he's got Jules' failed attempt at going pop artist, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, he just did Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. It's really good. I think that you would really appreciate it.
That's cool. Actually, they mentioned it like around November last year. I was thinking of doing like a video called the Limp Bizcast, and yeah, yeah. And I was gonna bring two friends, Derek from Stop Skeletons from
Uh huh.
Fighting and Jay Hunter from OSW Reviews, because they both have talked to me about Limp Bizkit unprompted. I didn't start it. They started talking to me about it. I was like, we should just go through their entire discography and just this is the Limp Bizcast, and but never really came together. Shockingly.
Well, it's never too late, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, over the past year or so, you've been doing a series called "The Worst Fighting Game," and what made you want to do that? Was it just that you came across Criticom and you wanted to talk about it, and then it just turned into a series out of nowhere, or did you go into it thinking I could do more like this?
So thank you so much for bringing this up, because it is, and you're very, very close to it. It's kind of a combination of both things you just said. So I was just going to play Criticom just casually as like a little gameplay video, and that was it. And, come up with like a funny sentence and just say like, this is the title of the video. This is a really bad fighting game, Criticom, PlayStation 1. And then when I actually sat down and played Criticom, I've had a disc for years, never actually played it. But I know the genesis of the developer. Then they made Dark Rift, then they made Cardinal Sin, then they made the Fear Effect games, which is always weird to me. So when I actually sat down and played it, I was legit like slack jawed at how bad it is, how it feels so terrible to play. And I was just kind of, no, this is different now. We've reached a new level. I don't know what to do with this gameplay video. So when I was uploading it, I'm like, I'm just gonna show, I'm not gonna do my regular thumbnail. I'm just gonna show the box art and that's it. Don't have any text, and I'm just gonna write as the subject, as the title, the worst fighting game.
Yeah.
So I just posted that, and like that kind of blew up. Maybe I'm assuming that's the title, and that's they just hit the algorithm just right, because it did a much better than all my other gameplay videos of that month. So then I was like, you know what? Like that's actually not that bad. Like, I'll what's worse than Criticom?
Yeah.
Then maybe what can I play after that? And
And all the
then I
commenters
just
will be like, "Oh, well, you should play this. They should play that."
so then yeah, that leads to, obviously, like engagement in the comments and suggestions, like legit really good suggestions. People have suggested me some dank ass shit that I've never I heard of, but I never actually played it myself. And I've had some great people on Twitter, like Griffy Bones and Epsilon, who specialize in like poverty fighting games, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you really want to check this out," and here's a link to get this working, and blah blah blah. So then I just started retitling everything like the worst fighting game, and the second episode after that was kind of a combination because I hadn't quite figured out exactly what I wanted to do, where it's a bit more structured, but I'm still kind of talking off the cuff a bit. Then I was like, you know what? Why don't I just move this into completely scripting it? It'll just be faster that way and more.
That was what was so interesting to me because I didn't start with Criticom. I started with I don't know that animal game one, I guess, or
Brutal.
brutal or something else I saw, and then I went back and I watched Criticom, and I was so taken aback by like, wow, this feels just like he's talking as he's playing. It just feels very freeform. But then all the other episodes after that feel like a real like legit scripted series. And so I was always curious if you just did that one not even expecting anything of it. And it's interesting to find out that's kind of the case.
Yeah, exactly. Like I wasn't yeah, very, very shortly after, like it started doing, better numbers. And I was like, well, maybe, I love talking about old, crap fighting games. Like it's like one of my favorite subjects in the world. And I kind of like hit myself in the head going, why didn't I think of this sooner? I had episodes of what happened about some janky old fighting games here and there, but there's an endless supply of them, and some people will go like, "Oh, you should do War Gods or Bio Freaks." And there's some games I just know well enough that I'm like, "That's too good."
Yeah, War Gods is too good to be on that series.
It's janky, sure. It's
Yeah.
not polished, blah blah blah, but like it's too playable. Like it doesn't feel that terrible to play. So some of them I'll just dismiss. And like what was it? Star Wars. Terrace Kasai, Cassie, I don't care anymore about how to say it. That one I was really considering. I'm like, look, that's not great, but like, if a fighting game has a super meter, like already it's kind of a certain quality. Like, you know what I mean? Like it has to have mechanics. And it has to feel like half decent. And like Star Wars definitely has some problems, but I was like, I'm really like on the fence about including this. But a lot of people suggested it, and I was like, let's just see where it ends up. And I was shocked with like a little bit of the lack of presentation. Like that game has 4-second endings, which is just really funny and weird to me. And the fact that they tried so hard to make a game, like they wanted to make a really good fighting game, and it was just the team's first attempt at it, and they didn't really know what they were doing. So I thought at the very least it's fascinating just to talk about it in general. So,
what was I going to bring up? Does your love of beat 'em ups also stem from your love of fighting games, and which genre did you get into first as a kid?
It pretty much sprung up around the same time. A lot of like my childhood memories of playing certain games came from going to birthday parties. Usually like, I didn't have too many friends growing up, but I would get invited to a lot of birthday parties just to like shore up the numbers at a particular kid's birthday party. I was basically an NPC. So, I would go over, and I remember the specific party where a kid had like year-end kung fu on the NES, and I believe,
Wow.
if memory serves, on the NES version of that, it had kind of a fighting game mode where you were locked in an arena. It might not have been year-end kung fu, but it was definitely an NES game, and you were locked in an arena, and you were against like one character. And then after that, you go against another character, and they were very stereotypical, like Asian fighters. Like there is a big like, what's the guy that has the belly and shoots fire? Damn it.
in Streets of Rage is Big Ben.
Yeah, it's Big Ben. No, God, he's in
Karnov.
Karnov. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's a Karnov looking guy, and then you fight all these other guys. And I remember playing through that. Never playing this game before, and I just remember pushing the buttons enough that I was getting through. I remember people cheering me on at this birthday party, and I was like, "Yeah, cool." And that was like my first like fighting game sort of thing. But then the kid also had a Super Nintendo, which is a huge luxury to me because I did not get a Super Nintendo until like the start of '95. It was like the Donkey Kong Country like set that came with that. So he had a Super Nintendo and he had Final Fight, the Super Nintendo port of Final Fight.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that for the first time and just blowing my mind, like the graphics and the sound and such. And then another birthday party around that same time, that same year. Fuck this kid and his family that they were able to do this. They were able to rent out an entire arcade for like 2 hours, and they got all the machines set to free play.
That's so cool.
And I was like, you're the richest kid in the world. I thought, how are you able to do that? And they had Final Fight there and the arcade version. I was like, oh, this is like the Super Nintendo game. But it has multiplayer and has like this cool extra level and like, oh, look at this super hot character with pink hair. Yeah, it kind of around that same time frame, I was kind of like, oh yeah, fighting games. And then I think my first exposure that I can remember for Street Fighter 2 was playing the Rainbow Edition of Street Fighter 2 in a movie theater and being able to control the heights of fireballs and all this crazy stuff. And that kind of spurred from there. Then I was regularly reading EGM Game Fan and seeing like, oh, here comes Super Street Fighter 2. And I was like, whoa. And I did fall out of love with Street Fighter for like a little bit, like a year or two when they first revealed Street Fighter Alpha. I was like, oh, really? More Street Fighter? I've moved beyond that. I'm a primal rage kid now. Yeah. Everyone has that like kind of embarrassing moment if they're into fighting games. There's probably a time where you were like, you're really into this game and maybe you don't want to talk about it anymore, but you were really into it.
The game that I'm hoping that you cover someday, and I want to cover eventually, is a terrible fighting game that me and my friend went all in on for a long time, and it was Marvel Nemesis. The EA made one where EA made their own heroes and villains.
Yeah.
Did you play it?
I played it at the time. I played it again for a little gameplay video a little while ago, and yeah, I can totally see people being super into that. But I remember at the time, the thing that really turned me off was like the art style.
Oh, it's ugly as hell. It's pathetic looking.
And at the time, I thought it was bad. Like, now it's really bad. Yeah. You look back on it, but the idea is still so sound. Mm-hmm. And even if you say, like, oh, EA, well, not EA per se, but, like, the developer, I think it was Nihilistic Software, they made these characters, the EA characters. Because at first when it was announced, everyone's like, what, John Madden's going to be in the game? Like, what is an EA character, really? And at the time, I remember like, this looks really ugly. The character roster's so weird. And a lot of people have theorized it's because so many Marvel characters were spread out throughout different like publishers and stuff. Like Activision was publishing Hulk games at the time. So maybe that's why Hulk's not in it. Certain X-Men characters aren't, whatever it may be. I remember playing it and thinking this seems fine, I guess. But, not going crazy on it like when it was new, and when I play it nowadays, it's like it's much rougher than I remember. But the idea is still so cool.
Man, I'm so glad I get to talk about this with you. What I love so much about the game is just the full 3D movement.
Yeah,
like the fixed camera, and you just run everywhere like you're playing like an action game, right? That's one thing I really love about it,
And you can interact with so much stuff in the stage.
Yeah, it's very interactable, and I loved the mutant button, how holding the mutant button changed your attack, your block, your jump, and your grab to a mutant form of all of them. I thought that was really cool. You attack with Iron Man, but then you hold mutant power and hit attack, and he shoots his rockets. I thought that was cool, and my favorite thing about that game is how they didn't give a fuck about balance.
They didn't.
It was like 100% comic book loyalty, because if you think Elektra versus Magneto, who wins that fight? Magneto wins that fight. Like there's no question. And so like it's like round one fight, Elektra can barely pick up a barrel, and then like Magneto just uses his mutant power to fly to the top of the stage where she can't hit him, and then he magnetizes a tank to him, throws the tank at Elektra, and she dies in one hit. And I was like, this is the greatest thing ever.
It'd be really great if you could be fighting Magneto and just take out a wooden gun, and he just like gives up. He's like, I can't beat that.
That's what I wanted. That was what's so good about it. You could see Daredevil getting his ass kicked by Iron Man, and there's nothing he can do about it.
But then that leads to the discourse of like Dragon Ball Z fighters, like lots of Dragon Ball purists are like, this is bullshit. Like Krillin can't beat anybody, any of these characters. Like, how does that make sense?
Right, but you have to make a good game. You have to make it like an Injustice, right? Yeah, Superman should beat everyone. Yes, obviously, Superman should beat Catwoman. But we're trying to make a balanced, competitive fighting game here that's fun to play. It can't be Marvel Nemesis. Like we can't have that be an actual game.
That's why I at least appreciate NetherRealm's effort, and at least I don't remember what the thing in Injustice that everyone just injects themselves with like Superman's blood or like whatever. It's a component that just lets everyone be super, right? Mm-hmm. And in MK versus DC, it's like, Superman's weak to magic. And there's magic everywhere in the world of Mortal Kombat, so that's why Joker can punch him. You know, I appreciate bad explanations. Okay. Like, I love that.
You don't even need it. I mean, you look at Marvel vs. Capcom 1, you got Jill Valentine fighting, what, Darkheart or whatever. It's like, yeah, this shouldn't be possible. We don't need an explanation. It's just a game. It's just, we're just having fun here.
Yeah. The ultimate example of this like being bad is like just not putting in certain characters because like, they can't fight them because they're a weak character.
Yeah,
if the character's popular and they have like a moveset or a powers that might make them fun, doesn't matter. Put them in the game.
Yeah. We touched on beat 'em ups a little bit. You were involved in the beat 'em up, The Takeover, right? You were a producer. Yes. I was wondering how you got involved in the title and what it was like.
So around like I would say like 2015, might have been 2016, but I just saw that The Takeover was just a regularly troll Steam. I just put in the fighter tag or the beat 'em up tag or whatever. And I saw that, and it was just like a one level demo, and it was really early. But the thing with beat 'em ups, fighting games too, but beat 'em ups especially, is if on second one you punch something that feels good, that feels impactful, then you already have something. You already have like a good base to work on. Okay. So
it's like having a good shotgun, right?
Exactly. It's the difference between, a Duke Nukem 3D or a Doom 3. Like your shotgun is
oh my god. You just doubled the comments on this video just by talking shit about that.
It always does. I recognize this now, but for the Takeover, it was one of my very few Steam reviews. I usually if I'm going to do a review, I'll be like, yeah, pretty cool game, but I typically don't put an actual review. I know I probably should, the amount of stuff I download, but for the Takeover, I felt compelled to write a review. Like, hey, yeah, this feels really cool, blah, blah, blah. I like the background art, and this was a pleasure to play through. And I think I wrote something like, if you ever need someone to like QA this game, just test whatever you have coming up next. Like, I'd love to try out future builds, blah, blah, blah. And then the developer Pelican contacted me back and said, "Oh yeah, thank you so much for that review. I could throw you a code or throw you an exe file when it's ready, just to see what you think." And I said, "Sure, yeah. I used to do QA for like 7 years, and I can just write up a document and say any bugs that I find." He's like, "Cool," and it just kind of blossomed from there, where I would say, "Hey, that was really neat what you added in here, but it'd be really cool if that could be put in." And he would say usually like, no, like that's kind of beyond what I know how to do. Pelican also before this worked at Sumo Digital on like the very first Sonic a racing game, Sonic not Transform, but I think just Racing All Stars, and he just wanted to make this game for himself, and it got to the point where I was helping him so much stuff, and um, he was debating on how to get the story done. He had like one little story sequence that was like maybe 7 seconds long, and it was made with like the in-game assets. And I just talked to him. I'm like, you know what? How about I would love to write the story for this game. It's always been, I'm an okay writer, and he's like, I don't know, anything about it, like in terms of structuring a story. I just wrote like 2 lines of dialogue, and yeah, that'd be cool. You could do that, and I was doing it pro bono for like a long time, and until eventually it got to the point where, well, the game's almost finished. I know someone from Limited Run. Would you think that they might be would you want to see if we could possibly get this game like a physical run? And he's like, that would be awesome. And through another contact, we're able even to get Yuzo Koshiro to write a track for the game. Now, all of this was done, of course, months or even years before Streets of Rage 4 was ever even announced to exist.
All
So
right,
the whole raison d'etre here was like, well, there's no Streets of Rage game, so here's like very heavily influenced by Streets of Rage, and here you go. And then like Streets of Rage 4 gets announced. I'm like, oh, great, cool, awesome, love that.
And it just happens to be like the best beat 'em up ever.
It happens to be very, very good. We did release the finished Steam version like about 6 months before Streets of Rage 4 was out.
All right.
So we're like, okay, well, it would be really bad if it was released on the same day. But fortunately it wasn't. But, I learned a lot on that project. I wrote the story. I had people come in and help do additional art, music, schedule play tests for the game with like a bunch of people. I had trailers made. I was kind of the PR for the game for a bit, and eventually, like Pelican was so happy and with how everything is going, he was like, I need to give you a cut of what I'm making here, and all these deals are going through. So even though I spent like a good amount of money getting things made for the game, like all the cutscenes were like hand drawn. I came away with it, making a profit on it as well. And he did like incredibly well for the game. It got released on the Switch, the PS4, and Steam. So it was a really fun, very long, and I'm not even doing like the majority of the work. It's like he basically built the game himself, and was able to expand it a lot by just. I think eventually, like he just said, like one update, he's like, okay, you can air juggle people now. And I'm like, what? Because that's kind of the thing that it needed at that point. I'm like, oh, you can juggle people with like your gunshots, and you can do this. He's like, yeah. And then it was amazing the amount of things he was able to make the amount he was able to expand the game just gameplay wise, and put in a training mode. Put in vehicle sections in the game that are very overt homages to some Sega games in the past, like Outrun and Afterburner, and that's actually really fun. I'll take a little sidetrack here. Just one day he gives me a bill. He's like, okay, there's a jet fighter mission in the game now, and at this point I'm writing the story, and half like. Not announcing this beforehand, he just decided I really want to have like a jet fighter sequence, and I'm like, okay, why? How? Because like the story was kind of written very broadly at this point. I think the half of it was like fleshed out with dialogue, and he's like, well, I just wanted to do it, and like it was already done and it was good, so it wasn't like, oh, this is shit, well, just take it out. No, it was fun, and I was like, how am I gonna fucking what? So I had to come up with like a way that the characters find a jet fighter and bridge that gap. But it was really interesting doing that, and there's lots of little quirks along the way, like some things in the cutscenes don't quite match up with the in-game graphics, things like that. Changes happen later. Couldn't really redo all the hand-drawn cutscenes. cost way
Yeah.
more than that's worth, you know?
Yeah.
But I learned so much, and it was so fun to do. And while it's not even close to the quality of like some other like beat 'em up games, just because it's made by one guy primarily. It's so amazing the amount that he was able to do and flesh out and make fun. And so I I would do everything over again and in a heartbeat, because
Yeah.
I learned so much, and even got to go to like I've been to PAX several times as a as a content creator, just stock all the booths and play stuff. But I actually worked the booth like 2 years in a row, showing off the game, and that's something I would never do again. I don't know how game developers do that, just standing there for like 10 hours a day for 4 days in a row, and just in this big sweaty room, just answering the same questions over and over. That was like the hardest part of the whole development. So
But it was really cool that you got to get involved with something that that got your attention, that you wanted to support, and that they reached out to you, and that's got to feel really good.
yeah, and it opened up avenues to with limited run and a couple of other companies about, like, if you ever want, if any other games, projects you want to bring to our attention, like, we can talk. And I have like something way in the background, like the farthest back burner you can get, but there's like a game kind of around there that I still want to do, but not anytime soon. But it did open up that door, which is pretty exciting as well.
You mentioned Streets of Rage 4, and I wanted to ask, like, since we've seen the genre, kind of get pushed forward into modern times a bit, like adding RPG elements or more unlockables for replay value, training modes, dynamic combo systems, and juggles. Do you see titles like Streets of Rage 4 and other modern beat 'em ups as better than the classics, or do you still find yourself preferring the classics even though the new ones are great?
I think the only thing you can really say is that graphically, like, you're never really going to achieve that same nostalgia with like how modern pixel art is made.
Yeah.
Like, it's always going to be a little off. And in case of Streets of Rage 4, it's very different. And even the way that they do pixelization in the throwback levels and such is like not ideal. It's the best you could probably hope for with, like, a limited solution. But gameplay wise, I certainly, you can only go back to one Streets of Rage game. Like, gun to your head, I'd go back to 4. As much as I love like 2, and even 1, like I'll go back to 4. There's, it's just a lot more dynamic, a lot more to sort of chew through. And and if it counts, you throw the DLC on there, you could theoretically play the DLC forever.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of that. And I think overall, like, when stuff like Castle Crashers was coming out and Scott Pilgrim versus the World, like, we weren't quite there yet. Those were kind of very fringe efforts.
Yeah, Scott Pilgrim like lost me in a couple hours. I was kind of like, okay, this
Yeah.
is cute, but
I mean, I really like the source material. I read the comic. I was hyped for the movie. It looks amazing. Love all the personality. Gameplay wise, especially if you're one player, like, it's almost like I'll play the first level,
yeah,
and I'm good. I'm
feel like
good.
you've seen it.
If you have all the characters leveled up with all their moves, and there's 4 people, that's still a very good time. But it doesn't really do it for me on like a single player like sort of standpoint. But like when Castle Crashers that were like coming out, it was like, okay, that's an isolated thing that just kind of happened. And you didn't think like beat 'em ups would ever really come back. And I'd say, well, it's like still kind of under the surface. Like, it's getting to the point where there's like a cool new beat 'em up that people are looking forward to, like at least 1 or 2 of them a year.
Yeah,
Like,
it's been pretty
obvious, yeah. Obviously, Turtles. Like last year, there are a couple more. Streets of Rage 4. I'm a big fan of Fight and Rage. That was excellent game.
Final Vendetta just came out.
Oh yeah, Final Vendetta. Yeah, and even one that a lot of people talk about, but Jitsu Squad is also one on Steam, and I think it's on consoles as well. That one's really crazy. That's very different compared to a lot of the other ones. It has more to do with like Ninja Baseball Batman or something like that, and Saturday morning cartoons. That game is super nuts. And yeah, Final Vendetta, like that tough break for them that they released the exact same day as Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Like that's rough. And the other interesting thing about Final Vendetta is that I played a version of it like 2 months before its launch. They'd sent me a code, and I was like, this is very solid. I like this, great soundtrack. I like this, I like that, and it was like unwaveringly the hardest beat 'em up I've ever played. Like I was like, why are there zero continues? Like, why did you do this? You're not making this for the arcade. I don't, and even if you were, I don't. I can put more quarters into it, but it just wouldn't let you continue. And I was like, Jesus. Fortunately, I think a few days after it came out, they're like, okay, we heard everyone. I think people let them know, and they instituted like a bunch of difficulty changes.
I saw a review of it, and and the guy made an interesting point that I don't remember the name of his channel, but he talks a lot about beat 'em ups, and he said that like you judge a beat 'em up's quality on a no continue run or a one continue run, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't judge it like that, then people just play it on normal with infinite continues, and then they beat it, and they're like, "This isn't worth $20. I just beat the game in an hour." And it's like, yeah, but like you're dying a whole bunch, like. The quality of the game is getting good at it, and to where you're not dying, and to where like in the arcade where you wouldn't be pumping in so much quarters to get through it. Like that's the quality of the game, and that's why they didn't want to release it with continues, because the game is not balanced or designed around you being able to just play through like that, and that if people do play through like that, they'll judge the game for what it isn't. And so I can see that. It must be tough to figure that out for developers, but at the end of the day, you just kind of have to bite the bullet and do it. You have to give you do what Turtles and what Streets of Rage did. You do a story mode, and you have an arcade mode.
Yeah.
And when I talk about these games, I talk about arcade mode, because that's the way you play it, right? When you know how to play, you play arcade mode. And then that's how you have to judge the game. That's how you judge your characters and your enemies based on that, because that's really the true game, I think.
And you're absolutely correct. When I was playing this, I like there's the mechanics are very, very pared back. Like it's punch, it's like I think a block and a grapple, and that's basically it. And when I was playing, I was just finding like I feel like this maybe is unbalanced. Like I'm not getting, like I'm just being swarmed by enemies, and I don't have a lot of options. And the developer's previous game was, I believe, Battle Axe, which I had played, and was also very similar in that I think there was like zero continues, and it was long level based action game where they're like not maze like levels, but you're kind of wandering around like a big map. And I just remember being, oh my God, this is hard. And it's a tough balance, because you want exactly what you just said for any beat 'em up fans to judge it on like what it's balanced around. But you run the risk of people that are like an intermediate level or just want to have fun, and they're not going to have it. And doing an arcade and a story mode is like an even better, like smarter way to go about it. I think in the takeover we have like because it's been a while since I looked at the main menu. We have an arcade and a story mode, and the arcade is just the levels without the cutscenes. Essentially, a little bit like what Turtles did, even though it still kind of has cutscenes as well. The arcade mode, but yeah, like I'm still like grateful that they added that in, because I could just see when you start up a game and it's that hard, you just go like, well, people are. When I was at PAX, right? I had people just dying in like the first like screen or two in the takeover, because they didn't know how to how
or they don't know beat 'em up. Yeah. You can't assume that everyone playing your game knows the genre.
No. And which would even spur us to make like a how to play section. Like it's just a bunch of funny like almost instruction manual sized like screen that say like, hey, you can do this, you can do that. Oh, this saps your strength if you use this move. I remember like, I don't know, it must have been like 17, 18 years old. He's like playing the game, and he's like, how come I keep losing my health? I'm like, oh, because you're using your special move a lot. He's like, it drains my health. And I go, yeah. And he goes, that's stupid, and
Oh,
walked
yeah.
away.
Yeah.
And while that's heresy to any beat 'em up fan, like, I get it. You didn't grow up with these, and taken at face value, that's a stupid mechanic. Like, if you just tell a person your move hurts yourself, and why would you design a thing? Well, you have to go into the whole explanation. Then they've already walked away from your booth at that point. You're talking to no one.
That's what was brilliant about Streets of Rage 4. This special system only draining green life and then recovering it through dealing damage, also encouraging you to be more defensive so you don't get hit, but encouraging you to be offensive so you get your health back. Oh my god, just beautiful. So good.
And you can even explain that very roughly to someone who's just starting to play for the first time. It's like, oh, and if you do this, like, you get all your life back, so don't worry. And they kind of realize, like, oh, I'm getting rewarded by, like, playing well. And that, like, very few beat 'em ups do that. It's just kind of like, it's either hard or it's going to be easy, or its focus is on here. So I remember playing it with my friend Rocky, like, when it came out, and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is like the old Streets of Rage games, and it's been a while since he's played anything like this. And I was like, oh, and he's asking about the green health, and I told him. He's like, oh, that's cool. And then we beat the game that night. So you have to have these aha moments, especially when it's a genre that's like the beat 'em up or anything similar, where you can clearly explain to someone, oh, this is how that works, and keep it short, and then their attention span will stick with it. So like, I think that's a big part of Streets of Rage 4's success, and how it did so well. Please, if you're listening, Capcom, please make a new Final Fight. I'll suck your dick.
That makes me think of Turtles, where I like Turtles a lot. I think it's a really good kind of a casual game that's hopefully going to get more people into the beat 'em up genre. But the gameplay incentive, I feel, isn't there. That combo meter just doesn't mean anything. All the enemies die very quickly.
I made sure to watch your videos on this. So.
Did you? Okay, see, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't want to assume, but like that's like the one thing I feel like is lacking from it, is that's some kind of system where I'm like, I can do these long extended combos, but give me a reason to do it. Give me something, because it'll make me want to do them more. I think the game's fun enough to make me want to do them, but I just think it could go a little bit further. Like, you can't control the point system. There's no way to control how many points you get by your gameplay, and I just wish there was something on top of it. Do you think they're gonna buff throws? What do you think? You think they're gonna do it?
I considering .mu and Tribute, like, have updated their games like almost all the time with like either full DLC or quality of life improvements. And I was a little bummed when I first heard that thing where, like, no, there will be no DLC for the game. And then the CEO was like, no, we never said that. They said, right now we don't have any plans, but we're excited to see what people think, and then we'll do it. And I'm going to assume they're going to, go in there and I add either DLC and make sure to fix some things. It's tough though, because if this was any other franchise, if it was like, just a brand new beat 'em up, and it was like, you can't get away with not offering all that much, but because it's based on TMNT, their main focus, I'm sure, was just like, we have to do right by TMNT fans and stuff, and like, hardcore beat 'em up fans, secondary. But that's what they should have done for an IP like this, especially since Turtles, game-wise, have had a rough time the last couple of years. So
slice and dice.
Yeah. Jesus.
God, that I'll never forget that. We rented that game for a party, and after 30 minutes of just slice and dice, it was like, turn it off.
So I think they'll probably make some changes. I don't know whether buffing throws, like, I would suggest that. I think your suggestion of being able to turn when you're doing your charge strike is like a really good one, because before I had watched your video and I'm charging my strike and I'm like, why can't I move to the left. The bad guys are all now on the left
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
That was a big one. But it, it it really depends. Like one thing I know that they also take a lot of they take a lot of time. Like the Streets of Rage 4 DLC took ages and ages to come out, but they did it. You know, they gave a fantastic update to the game. So I think if changes or DLC are going to come out, it's going to be a while before we hear about it.
Okay.
But it was made. That's the thing about it, is that it's made with such love and care in terms of, you know, its graphics, its presentation, and its general gameplay and how fun it is moment to moment. That I do think that they'll take the time to refine the experience a bit more in the future.
Yeah, I
I
hope
don't
so.
know if they'll do everything that could use some polishing and tightening up, but I think they'll do some things.
Yeah, yeah. I would love to see in arcade mode, in arcade mode, a toggle option to turn off the ability to meditate,
Yeah.
and some kind of way to control your point gain, some kind of revamping of like an arcade specific version of the combo system to make it like Streets of Rage, where if you're comboing a dead enemy, the combo hit counter goes up, but the color doesn't change.
Hmm.
And then if you can get the color to certain levels, then you start earning extra points or something like that. I think could just push it a little over the edge would be nice, because at this point, like I'm after beating arcade mode on hard, I'm like I don't really want to play it anymore because I kind of feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over. But like
Yeah, I get you.
learning how to play Blaze in Streets of Rage 4 a year later, it's just been like so refreshing.
Yeah, it's just like I think at the end of the day, they're gonna, like, any sort of big changes that they'll make or DLC is gonna still skew towards more the turtle fan, like, you know, an added character or
Yeah.
like more stages or a new mode, maybe even the versus mode from the home
Yeah.
version of TMNT Turtles in Time. And for like the hardcore nuances of the fighting, it's like I want to be surprised that they'll like do like a big overhaul, not a big overhaul, but like, you know, like the things that you've suggested. But we'll see. Tribute Games is like a couple of miles away from me, and they're really cool group of guys. They were able to toss me the demo of the game a few weeks before the game actually came
Yeah.
out, and they're just really excited and supportive. And you at least know that, like, as long as their hands aren't tied by a publisher, which I don't think that they are, like they'll try their best to improve the game in any way they can.
Yeah, I totally agree that their priority is Turtles fans first, hardcore secondary. The stuff that I'm trying to suggest, things like you know, a temporary throw invulnerability for certain frames and stuff like that. Like the stuff I'm trying to suggest is I'm trying to keep in mind the casual audience. I don't want to suggest stuff that would hurt their experience.
No, of
I want
course
to
not.
put things in there that maybe they wouldn't even notice or they would come to see,
Yeah.
and but will also help the hardcore audience.
Something a friend of mine said, a very, very casual, like, you know, beat 'em up action game fan. He's just like, wow, this feels like good. Like, what's like, I'm just hitting things, and like, I used to play all the old Ninja Turtle games all the time, and like, he's like, I'm really liking this. Like, I don't know what it is, and it was like, that's probably like the autocorrect on the attacks, and you always, you know, almost always hitting
Yeah.
the foot soldier that you want, because
A lot of
not too long
magnetism.
ago. Yeah, not too long ago, I was playing like Turtles in Time. I think it was Turtles in Time. Might have been the arcade game where it's like, yeah, they absolutely made the right call there. So that's something. That's an example of, like, you know, a small change that not a lot of people might notice at first, but it makes for a much smoother experience. So stuff like that.
It does, but it also leads to some serious bullshit. Like when you
Of
want
course.
to when you want to do a slide attack towards the enemy in front of you, but you get magnetized to the guy that's on the opposite side of
Yeah.
the manhole, and then you fall
Yeah.
in. You're like, I didn't want to go that way.
There's unfortunately, there's always a caveat to, like, you know,
Yeah.
big sweeping changes like that. So
Well, Matt, I know that you had to go around this hour, so I don't want to keep you too long. I had a few more things I wanted to get to, but
if you can quick fire a few,
Okay.
I'm down. I have five. I'd say I have 5 minutes.
okay. Okay. Fast questions, fast answers. You ready?
Gotcha.
Right.
Go.
What was your favorite What Happened episode to work on?
Ooh, Oh fuck. Okay, maybe not. Maybe not. I can't answer very very fast. I would say that Street Fighter 3 Third Strike absolutely up there, and the more recent one I did on Midway, the company in general, was
Oh,
also
okay.
really really fun.
That was really good. What was the most complicated episode to work on?
Oh, I do have an answer for this. Oh Christ, I was thinking about this not too long ago. Most
It's a pain in
complicated.
the ass to get done.
I'll come back to that. What's the
Okay.
next
All
one?
right. All right. Okay. I got two more. Is there a what happened episode that you don't like anymore?
Like almost every single YouTuber, I'd say that the first 10 episodes are garbage.
Okay. Okay.
Because they're so old now. But I'd say like yeah, the first 10, kind of really feeling it out, and the production's a little rough back then. My voice sounds weird. I hate it.
Okay.
So yeah, the first 10 I'm probably not the biggest fans of. But after 10, it's all gravy.
Okay. Two more. What is the game that you are really want to be able to cover in the next couple years?
Just for anything or what happened?
Let's do for what happened. Something that's been on your mind and you're just not ready to get to it yet, but you really want to.
Probably Metal Gear Solid 5.
Oh, interesting.
It's I have this thing where it's like I still have never beaten Metal Gear Solid 5 because I lost interest so hard. Is it a really good plain Metal Gear Solid game? Absolutely. Does it have the weakest, most uninteresting story, at least to me? Yes, it does, unfortunately, and that sucks.
And only two environments. Like it's like
And
the
only-
woods or the desert, and I found that
and
really.
you- And we know throughout things leaked that's what, if guess what, I'm going to answer your previous question with this. If I was to make the Metal Gear Solid 5 episode, that would be the most complicated episode I ever make, because we've seen so much evidence over the years, like, oh, this was cut, there's like a whole other mission set that was cut, and then what the stuff with David Hayter and Jack Bauer, like what the fuck was up with that. Then just the Konami issue and stuff, and then you can throw Silent Hills in there as well, like
and
that.
Metal Gear Survive gets tossed in there as well.
And Metal Gear, so fuck it. Like that's the answer right there.
All right. I thought maybe you would say Duke Nukem Forever was a complicated episode or something like that, because that's a lot of history as well.
It was at the time, like when I was making it, I was just like, yeah, there's a lot to kind of chew through. And if I was to make that episode nowadays, then that'd be even more complicated with the leak of the 2001 version and stuff, and just kind of the little bit of Twitter drama between George Broussard and Scott Miller that was brewing around then. So that would be an added bit to it. But yeah, it wasn't that bad.
Would you ever do Quake 1? You can dive into some Masters of Doom stuff?
It does get touched upon a bit in the Daikatana episode, but for a full thing, yeah, Quake could definitely be there, and you could even go into a little bid of what happened to Quake afterwards and how it had such a weird trajectory. Yeah. I mean, I've talked about this a bit, but it's like if id Software was to do another thing, like say give Doom a rest and maybe do a reboot of Quake or Heretic or Hexen.
Okay, this is my last question about what happened. What episode was the most controversial? What got you fan backlash?
That's a good question. Fan backlash. You know what? Maybe not the most, but the one I can think of most recently is just the one not too long ago because of its subject material, Dead or Alive 6. A lot of people were like, you didn't even talk about all the stuff that's wrong with the game. Well, first of all, that's not
that's not
the point of the show, but yeah, there is some stuff like I could have mentioned, like, oh, they took out the tag mode for whatever reason. I don't know why, but they took out the tag mode, which is synonymous with that series for a good while. And just the general, the discourse of people saying, I like my titty waifus, I think the game is fine, versus the people that are like, I hated all the shitty DLC practices, and I don't like, big titties in my fighting games because it is kind of silly to play. And there's that discourse there between the fans. And, I'm kind of especially in the last 2 years, I kind of just want to try to call it straight down the middle as, you know, the facts of its development, not go into the fan discourse about the game because it doesn't have anything to do with the story. You know, maybe as a slight ending to the video, I can be like, oh yeah, and fans, like, you know, weren't really happy about this change and that change. So that was a more recent one, I think. As well, I am actually just going back through my playlist to see if there was something.
Any flashbacks of trauma?
Because in the earlier episodes, I would kind of put my own take a bit into the game here and there, a little bit more. Well, quite a bit more than I do now. Just a lot of people were just like Grand Theft Auto, the definitive edition was fine for me. I didn't see any bugs. You're all entitled babies.
Oh, Cyberpunk got a lot of that too.
Cyberpunk was another big one, actually.
I had four YouTube response videos responding to my video on Cyberpunk.
Yeah, Castlevania 64 actually was another one. A lot of people either love or hate that game, and the people that loved it, you know, I'm not saying anything in the game like I think this game sucks, but people were like, this was so much better than Symphony of the Night, and I'm like, okay, I'm not even gonna touch that. And then like, you were too nice to this game. It was awful. What are you talking about? I'm like, I didn't say this was the best game ever. Like I didn't even approach that subject, so I don't know where you're getting that from. So it's basically things like that. Like people will maybe just see the title, maybe watch the first 5 minutes, and oh, he didn't shit on this game that I hate.
Yeah.
Well then, you know, I dislike this. I will click this little dislike button. Or like, you know, why is he not praising this game to the high heavens? Well, again, that's not the thing of the show, but it's the whole thing of YouTube, you know, it's the whole thing of making shows that even dabble close to this type of thing where you say, you know, a media critique on whatever. People are just, you know, now trained to either heavily disagree or heavily agree with whatever the subject is, and there's no nuance in between that. And so I kind of understood it like a bit, you know, when I started doing this series, and I'd see those takes, and I would kind of be like, I was way more annoyed than I am now, because I just know that this is how YouTube like has made the modern video watcher. Like even I get like that too. I'll see a video with a thumbnail, the provocative thumbnail that's like, this game is the worst. And I'm like, really? Onimusha 3? That's the hill that you're dying on? That's a weird one. Okay. And it will still make you click on it from time to time.
Yep. I clicked on that 2-hour video about why Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, is the worst show ever, and I've never even watched it.
Or like Eye Patch Wolf and his like, this is what's happening in Riverdale videos. Yeah. Like the insanity of Riverdale is ever so strong. And like I watched like 2 episodes of that show and I was like, this is not, I love Archie, but I don't like whatever this is, and I walk away. But then when I hear about all the crazy shit, Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2, that was definitely one where people were like, those stealth sequences were amazing. I didn't mind them. They only happened like 10% of the game. Yeah, that game's great. And yeah, and I think I was a little erring on the side of, you know, trying to be a bit more positive about it. Like I am getting quotes from the developers from interviews that they did in the past where they're kind of a little confused about the discourse around that game. They're like, the core game is like, it's really good. Why are you people so mean to us and stuff like that. So I think that was a big one as well.
Okay. Well, Matt, thanks so much for your time today. This has been a pleasure to have you on. I never expected to have you on here. It's been really cool to have you and some other channels that I've really like enjoyed watching over the past few years. You and the Sphere Hunter, and we've gotten some Mortal Kombat players on here, some Resident Evil speedrunners. It's been really cool to have you on here. Thank you for doing this, and for not being too Hollywood. You know.
No, like absolute pleasure. Very, very good questions, by the way.
Thanks.
Like You're quite good at this because sometimes you'll be on a podcast and I don't know, like it's just the same sort of conversations, and this is a bit different, and I really appreciate it. But if you ever want to shoot the shit on a future podcast just about whatever current game is coming up, I'm totally down for it. So just let me know.
Yeah, likewise, man. If you ever need me for something, you know how to find me. So when you finally do some kind of Doom Eternal episode, you know who to call.
Oh, geez, I don't even want to touch a Doom, even if there was a great story.
Right.
Doom Eternal, like the Doom Eternal discourse. Like I know really good friends. They're like, I hated that game, and I'm like, I don't know if we can be friends.
Yeah.
I don't know,
dude. You know what? It's like meeting someone who doesn't think Aliens is one of the best action movies of all time. It's like, well, I'm sorry, there's nothing to talk about here.
the only thing I'll give that person, I'm like, okay, why do you think that? Well, I like Alien better. That's fine.
Okay.
That you like that better. That's cool.
That doesn't make Aliens a bad movie.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And when I've met people like, oh, I like Predator 2 way more than Predator 1. And I'm like, you need to be deported.
Call a doctor.
You schedule the CAT scan. I'll pay for it. Like I'll help you figure out what's wrong with you, sir. But it's all media. It's all opinions on media. So it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you for listening. This has been Under the Mayo here with Matt McMuscles. Make sure you follow him on YouTube. You already know who he is. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. And this is us saying goodbye. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.